Welcome to Autoimmune Secrets. I'm Jonathan Otto. I'm your host. Last episode, we looked at a number of neurodegenerative diseases. Today, we're going to be exploring Lyme disease, considered to be the most common tick-borne infectious disease in the United States. Most people know it as an infection caused by deer ticks, but there's more to the story. We'll also be considering the role that toxins and parasites play in autoimmune disease, since we're living in constant exposure to environmental toxins. This is going to be such an important episode, and I'm telling you, it's valuable for absolutely everyone. Lyme disease and toxins, parasites are something that we actually all need to think about, and they can have dramatic impacts on our health. And when we turn it around, everything changes. You'll see that, and we'll prove it in this series, and you'll see what you can do today. Now, if you're enjoying this series, if you're loving it, then make the decision today to own this series. When you own the series, then you're able to share it with loved ones for a lifetime to come. And there's many people that you've probably been thinking about during the whole series and thinking, this would be really good for that person and that person. If only that person could hear this. Well, they can hear about it, and it's through you. And by owning this resource, you can share it with them. We give even another free buddy pass as a bonus, so another friend can get full access to what we're offering there, and a very special discount during the time that this is airing. So just make the decision today so you can secure that with all the bonuses and support our mission, but most importantly, support your health and the health of your loved ones for a lifetime to come with resources that change and save lives. And Autoimmune Secrets is that resource. Thank you so much. Let's dive into the rest of this episode.
I got into the Lyme disease world because of my wife. 1 Peter 4:10 says, each of you should use whatever gift you've received to serve others. And I really believe that your story becomes your specialty. My wife has a long health history, got quote unquote sick when she was 7 years old and just started all kinds of issues. Coma, heart surgeries, sinuses scraped, just list went on. They actually weighed her hospital paper file. This is obviously when they did paper notes back 25 years ago. And it weighed 20 pounds. That's how many, health issues she had. But when she had my daughter a little over 5 years ago, when Lila was born, the bottom fell out. And leading up to it, we had a lot of signs and things that should have gave us clues as to, this maybe isn't all going right. She was having some heart palpitations, some heart issues. The most common symptoms I see, especially with clients I work with, bad sleep, bad energy, which those go hand in hand. If you don't sleep, your energy during the day is just, it's bad. Anxiety is up on the list, a lot of brain symptoms, brain fog, and I would also say pain too. And especially like the arthritis, moving around type pain. I've got shoulder pain today, and now next day it's my knee, and now it's my hip, and it just seems to move about. That definitely is pretty classic for Lyme disease type symptoms, but Lyme is tough to diagnose. It literally has over 150 different symptoms, 150. And so you can have such variety of presentations based on that. And Lyme's nothing new. It really dates back actually to biblical times as well. There was an Iceman that they found, they estimate about 5,300 years ago. He was actually murdered and then frozen, and they actually found the Lyme disease bacteria in him. They named him Otzi, but the Borrelia burgdorferi bacteria they actually found in him. And technically for Lyme disease, it's a bacteria. The Borrelia burgdorferi is the bacteria, but there's Borrelia myomotai as well. So there's a couple different, strains that are quote unquote linked. But as far as the Borrelia species, there's over 300 across the globe. There's by itself in America, 100. So there's a lot of different actually strains of this bacteria. And Lyme disease comes in many different forms. Spiral shape, so it's a spirochete, likes to drill, so it doesn't like to float around the bloodstream, which makes it tough to diagnose or really tough to test as far as lab testing, blood testing. So it likes joints, it likes tissues, just organs as well too. When the Lyme disease bacteria, the spiral shape gets stressed, it can actually change or morph. It can change into a cyst or a round body form. So instead of essentially from going from that spirochete form, it'll literally engulf and eat itself and turn into a ball or like a cyst form, and it's that form itself is 1,000 times more protective against antibiotics when it changes into that form, and it can do it, within a matter of minutes, pretty quickly. It's also got an intracellular form, or what we call like a stealth form, where it'll go inside of our own cells, and this is where the autoimmune component comes in, causes autoimmunity, and then our body starts attacking our own cells, thinking that maybe that's Lyme inside there, or and then there's also another form called the biofilm as well. So there's a lot of different forms, and Lyme disease itself is evasive. I mean, it replicates as well too, even from a biblical standpoint. It replicates like sin. That people who really attempt, that sin really attempt to get others to do that. And it seems like this bacteria does the same thing in our body. That it gets other bacteria, other bugs, pathogens, viruses, fungus to tag along with it as well too. And all disease really has the same father, Satan. It's the same old act. So going after disease, you really have to go after what's not supposed to be in our body and what's attacking our body.
Too prevalent. CDC states right now that 300,000 people are affected each year by Lyme disease. And if when you actually, in their previous number, Jonathan, was 30,000. So now they're saying that's probably 10 times more than what we thought, 300,000. And a lot of the Lyme experts, or the people out in the Lyme disease world, believe that number is even underestimated. It's probably 10 times more than what that is. So it all comes down to, we can have Lyme disease, we can have the bacteria, Borrelia burgdorferi, or there's some other actual bacterias, different Borrelia species that actually cause it too. But, you can have it, but the key is how healthy are you as a host? If you're not well, you're going to exhibit symptoms and Lyme can thrive. But when you have a healthy body, no matter what bacteria, no matter what virus, no matter what parasite, your body should be able to fight it off to a good degree and not be affected. But when you are immune compromised, then that's really where the big issues come in and say, okay, now you're actually probably going to exhibit symptoms, now you're going to have issues, happening. So if we just focus on, instead of, quote unquote, fighting the darkness, right, the bug, if we focus on bringing light into the body, like life and healing and health, we're always going to win that battle. Lyme disease is a clinical diagnosis. So we're all trained in our society test, right? What test do I run? Do I run the Western blot? Do I run the ELISA? I would tell you both of those are worthless. Don't even waste your time. Too many false negatives, too many false positives. You might as well just do a coin flip. So if we go beyond the standard testing that's very inaccurate, now we get into, okay, there's IGeneX, there's Pharmacin Labs that does iSpot Lyme, there's DNA Connections. The favorite right now for me, testing-wise, if you want to run a test, is DNA Connections. They have a Lyme urine panel, but inevitably it's a clinical diagnosis. So clinically, if you have moving arthritis, you have arthritis pain that moves. Like one day it's a shoulder, the next day, oh, it's my knee, the next day it's back to my elbow or a different shoulder. Moving arthritis is classically a sign of Lyme disease. If you have costochondritis, where it's pain in your sternum, basically where the ribs meet the sternum and you press on here. If you press on here and you're like, because that hurts, that would be a sign, Lyme disease in my book. Right AC joint issues can be Lyme as well too, in case obviously you could like physically injure that shoulder too, but if you have shoulder problems with no injury, that could be a sign of Lyme. But there's, Lyme is complex in the fact that there's over 150 different symptoms. It mimics a lot of things, which is why they call Lyme disease the great mimicker. It's similar to syphilis, where it's a spirochete, so then therefore it seems like it could be sexually transmitted as well, which gets a little controversial, but when you really understand how many people are affected by it, it definitely does make you think that it's spread more than just by a tick, that it is spread by multiple vectors, multiple things, for Lyme disease, but inevitably it's a clinical diagnosis. So when you're looking at clinical diagnosis, you're looking for two or more things. So if you run a lab test and it says yes, okay, great. But if you have symptoms or your exam comes up and shows, yeah, these definitely look like Lyme disease symptoms, when there's, multiple things that match up, then that's when I would really consider Lyme disease to be a piece of the puzzle.
So Dr. J, how would you go about treating Lyme disease to get a positive result?
Treat Lyme. This is the $1 million question, right? My approach is, I think this is a little atypical because in the Lyme world, it's all about killing the bug, right? You've got a bug, you've got a bacteria. I want to kill it, I want to annihilate it. But to some degree, it still kind of goes back to this whole antibiotic, antibacterial craze that, we got to kill all the bugs in our body. Well, we have a lot of bugs in us. Now, obviously, Lyme is pathogenic and bad. But when I look at how do you get well from Lyme disease, the first thing that I always look at is what is protecting Lyme. Why can't the immune system by itself take care of this bacterial infection? And it's usually because it's protecting itself. So what protects Lyme disease? Heavy metal toxicity. So Lyme has multiple forms. It can be a spiral shape, a spirochete. It can turn into a cyst or a ball, which is very protective. It's pretty inactive activity-wise, like metabolically, but it's pretty protective against like antibiotics, 1,000 times stronger in a cyst, ball sphere type shape than a spiral shape. It's got its intracellular form, and this is where autoimmunity actually comes in with Lyme disease. Is Lyme will go inside of our cells and essentially kind of be inside of our own cells, and our body's like, wait a minute, I don't think that's right. Something's wrong with that cell, and it'll attack it. Well, when it starts attacking our own cell, maybe Lyme is inside of it, it starts attacking other cells. And the immune system starts trying to figure out what cells have Lyme in it and what doesn't, and it kind of goes haywire. So that's where autoimmunity specifically fits in with Lyme disease. But there's a fourth form that I would consider with Lyme disease, and it's biofilm. And biofilm, just think of it as the bug is producing snot or slime. And all this is doing is it's producing snot or slime. It's like a blanket where all kinds of different bugs, all the different forms of Lyme, all kinds of different bugs can live, and we've got this blanket over top. When we want to annihilate or we want to kill Lyme, it's hard to penetrate that wall or that blanket. So what we want to do is identify, okay, how can we actually start peeling that biofilm away to then get the bugs active so the immune system can take care of it. And when you actually look at the ingredients of biofilm, calcium, iron, magnesium, are some of the ingredients, copper, but two of the ingredients in there that get thrown in, and all biofilms are a little different, but two of the ingredients that can be included in this manufacturing of biofilm, mercury and lead. Very toxic heavy metals. Mercury has a very high affinity for the brain. Lead has a high affinity for some different organs, and it loves the bone. So, these heavy metals will basically protect Lyme. So if heavy metal toxicity is present and you're going after Lyme, the likelihood of healing from Lyme 100% and not touching the heavy metal toxicity or detoxifying heavy metals, it's very unlikely. So that's a shielding. The other shield that mentioned before too is Lyme lives inside parasites. So when somebody comes to me, or like one of my doctors, or helping somebody with Lyme disease, chronic Lyme disease, the first thing we do is not jump in to try to kill Lyme. The first thing we want to do is open up the drainage pathways, and then we want to start removing what is shielding or protecting Lyme, which includes heavy metal toxicity, which includes parasites as well. So that's why in any Lyme disease protocol, I would always parasite cleanse first, I would always detoxify, and then I generally like kind of the mopping up of the smaller pathogens, because it's just too hard to kill Lyme and these other pathogens when all these other things are protecting it. So there's definitely an order to it. And for the person that's struggling with health right now, as you're listening, if there's one thing that you can start focusing on, it's drainage and opening up the liver bile duct area. The liver bile duct, when that's clogged, that clogs up the body lymph, that clogs up the head, draining into the lymph. And if you want to put yourself at risk of Alzheimer's and dementia, don't drain your brain. So every time you sleep at night, your brain drains fluids. But when the liver bile duct is backed up, when the body lymphatic is backed up, the brain has a very hard time draining. So for you that's listening, memory issues, brain fog, just can't process, just, very sensitive to, smells and lights and things like that, drainage. Focus on drainage first, then come in and do some parasite cleansing. You can incorporate, depending on what it is, you can sometimes incorporate some detoxification. Focus especially on detoxification then as you get through parasites, and then do some mop-up of some pathogens. And I really think that that is a great timeline to understand how do you heal from Lyme disease.
So I finished my undergrad degree in medical school. I am from India, so that's where I finished my medical school. And then I came here, and as every other foreign immigrant, I have to go through the USMLE boards. And while I was studying for the USMLE boards, so amidst all of this studying and applying for application, 1, I neglected my health. 2, I overstressed my body by working so hard and neglecting rest and exercise. All of these together started giving me symptoms. So while studying, I started having headaches. I wasn't eating right. I wasn't exercising right. I wasn't releasing my bowels right. And eventually what happened is things started building up, and I had symptoms of constipation and diarrhea. And now my medical brain is like, oh, I have IBS, and this is because stress related. It's just a lot of cytokines in my body. And so I tried to take care of myself and try and healing it. And slowly the constipation and diarrhea evolved into having blood in my stool. Immediately I knew what was happening, because this is something I've always studied. But just the fact that it's blood in the stool, that will immediately give me an idea that I have, instead of an IBS, which is an irritable bowel syndrome, I have IBD, which is an irritable bowel disease, which could either be 2 things from what I've studied: ulcerative colitis or Crohn's. Ulcerative colitis, it's only really, what is that word? Smaller, it's not smaller. I can't remember the word, Jana. Yeah. Defined disease. It's only in the colon. But Crohn's disease is something that can occur all the way from the mouth, all the way to the anus. So it affects the entire GI. Both of them manifest initially as the same way. You have blood in your defecation, in your stool. You have fatigue. You're tired. You're weak. You start having all of these symptoms of different people manifest differently. I had blood in my stool, and that immediately scared me. And I'm like, no, I'm not gonna call it autoimmune disease, because I know the treatment for it. And the treatment for it is an immunosuppressant or a steroid, and I wasn't willing to go either of that route. So I started taking care of myself again, and I said, I'm not even doing this. The only way to diagnose you have either of these diseases is to do a colonoscopy, or if it is something that is upper GI, then you do an endoscopy. And I delayed this for 1.5 years without doing one and trying to heal myself. But it just got worse and worse. It went from 1 to 2 defecations a day. I had to run to the bathroom at least 10 to 15 times every single day. And and there were days where it was just blood instead of having any stool in it. There was so much pain, abdominal pain with it. There was a lot of cramping with it. I was losing blood, so I became anemic. I became fatigued now. I was not absorbing any food that I was eating right, so I was malnourished.
Like a 30-year-old who was an entrepreneur, no issues, no history, got a cold and never recovered, and is so sick now, or became so sick that he was wheelchair bound and had to move back home with his parents, and was given very nebulous diagnoses like post-viral syndrome that, went from specialist to specialist without any real answers. And what we've discovered is that the virus was really just the trigger for the impact of environmental exposures that his system now can't navigate anymore, and we're in the midst of reversing it, actually.
And you're seeing symptoms improve?
Oh yeah. So one of the major impact points was realizing that he actually had exposure to toxic mold in his apartment. That until he got the virus, his immune system was able to manage and not succumb to. And so he had maybe like little inklings of things, like he was a little bit more groggy in the morning and, you know, some congestion and things like that, but wrote it off, gets this cold virus, ends up even, I think it, you know, progressed to the point that he ended up on antibiotics at some point. And it was from that place that he never recovered. And in the discovery of, you know, his story, he came in with actually a lot of data and had been to, I don't even know how many specialists at major academic centers. And even in the initial set of data, there were a couple small clues in some of his biomarkers that to me are, you know, just pieces of a pattern to confirm. I already had my, you know, my hunch about like what it was that had his immune system so depleted that anytime he stood up, his heart started racing. He was so exhausted, you know, and was not able to, you know, function on his own. And as we dug in further, what, you know, the hypotheses that I had to begin with were confirmed by all the other lab tests. And in retrospect, being able to, you know, trace back to like, oh, you know, actually, there's black mold in my apartment, and that's, you know, was the underlying imbalance that, you know, made his entire system shut down after getting a viral trigger.
Wow, that's incredible. And so his symptoms are improving. His state.
He's very much improving.
Like what kinds of things are you seeing?
Well, he's able to actually like go and get out of the house and not be in a wheelchair all the time. He's able to walk longer distances. He's going, you know, he's still in recovery. But prior to that, he literally was bedbound pretty much. And he used a wheelchair just to make it to appointments, for example, because he couldn't, you know, stay up, you know, couldn't stay upright very long. His heart would race, he'd get a little bit of chest pain and shortness of breath, and all of that's disappeared. And he's slowly like progressing through the process of getting his strength back and getting his life back. And in the meantime, you know,
Sounds like he's quickly progressing.
He is. Well, he's only 30, right? And this happened in November. And
quick progression.
Right. And I think I'm trying to remember when we started working together several months ago, and he was very aggressively, you know, pursuing answers and running into all these dead ends, you know, from so-called experts who almost thought nothing of, you know, a 30-year-old bound to a wheelchair all of a sudden with no prior history and had no, you know, answers or solutions for him.
And you couldn't accept that?
No, I mean, that's just crazy. Why would you? You know, no real diagnosis. I mean, what's post-viral syndrome? What's this, you know, all these things that we call syndromes in conventional medicine are a way of trying to label something that really means like, we don't know, right? It's this constellation of symptoms and we call it the syndrome. So whereas I was always looking for like, okay, I knew that the virus was unlikely to be the main cause for his ongoing symptoms, but I recognized it as a trigger for other things. And that's where the, you know, excavation work was coming into play, was to say, look, where was the, you know, the foundation rocky that you were managing until this happened? Interesting.
Now this is looking for root causes and accurately defining cause and effect. Right. Whereas someone would look, okay, he had a cold, now he's in a wheelchair, so this is because of the cold, right, which is an incorrect cause and effect.
That's right. It's a misidentified cause and effect.
And so then it's like, well, but then the logical brain will say, that's not what happens after people get a cold, unless there's some strange anomaly that happens in the universe where this is the only person I've ever heard of that has this happen after a common cold.
Well, except for the fact that we see that now more and more as a trigger because people's foundations are so much more vulnerable.
Yeah.
But instead of it actually being, identified as like, oh, the common cold viruses are causing this, what they're not looking at is what's all the impact leading up to that. That we can actually change. Like we can actually change that impact.
We moved to the area and I was looking for new doctors, and I talked to a friend of mine who mentioned a holistic doctor that she sees. And I went for the first appointment and talked with him, and he told me about this whole plan that he wanted to do to test me and get a good full picture of my health. And when I when I ended up seeing him, the cost just like shocked me, and I was really concerned about it, and ended up not doing anything for about a year. My husband and I are part of a health share plan, and I started getting these really itchy eyes on top of other random things that people deal with every day, like acid reflux and sometimes achy joints or headaches every now and again. And I decided to see if our health share plan would help cover the cost of the testing, because there was just no way that we were gonna be able to make it work in our budget. And I called them. They were amazing. They said, yeah, we will cover the cost of this holistic doctor and the testing. That was really emotional for me, because I was just really excited. And so I came to see the holistic doctor, and things just really changed. Like, my itchy eyes went away. I lost like 30 pounds right off the bat, like within a couple months, and my headaches started going away. We did some genetic testing, and I found out that I am gluten sensitive, and the positioning of the genes that I have, we learned also affect our boys. This is Will, he's 5, and I have a 3-year-old son, and named Gus, and both boys also have the gene. And so when my husband heard that, he said, well, I guess I'll kind of walk along this. All of us, it'll just be easier if we all change our diet. And he started noticing some major changes in his health. He also lost weight. He was having multiple headaches every week, and those stopped. Other things like that. And then after I started my journey with the holistic doctor, we noticed that Will had been complaining a lot of headaches and belly aches almost every single day. So we got him on the waiting list, which was about 6 months at the time. And then every time I would go in, I would say, is he any higher on the list? He's having a headache every single day. This isn't right. Something's wrong. And then an opening came, and we jumped in a little early, and Will got tested, and we found out about some pretty significant deficiencies that he was having, if he had been going to see just a regular doctor, they may have diagnosed him as Crohn's or something else, but now he looks so much better. He rarely gets headaches and belly aches. We found out that we had toxic mold in our apartment. The holistic doctor suggested that we have our apartment tested, and there were toxic levels of mold, and so we moved in with some friends in our community as quickly as possible, and just within less than a week, his headaches stopped, and then his belly aches were more like diet related and deficiency related. But yeah, in a kind of a nutshell, that's kind of where we're at. We haven't gotten my husband or my younger son tested yet, but they're on the list.
So my focus is to really help people minimize the toxins, and a couple of the big ones that are so widespread are antibacterial products, those that have triclosan, triclocarbons, and other chemicals that are registered pesticides, to steer away from pesticide-ridden, genetically modified foods, especially grains that are conventionally harvested through a process called desiccation, which they essentially flood the field right before harvest with Roundup. And we don't realize what we're doing at this point. We don't even realize the long-term effects of this constant exposure to toxin.
You lost your parents kind of before their time, in a sense, right?
Yeah, they were both pretty young. My dad was in his 50s, my mom was in her 60s. They both died of cancer, which is why I've been so committed to changing this whole pattern of disease in my family for my kids. I grew up now, this is my hypothesis, this is not scientifically proven, but I grew up in New Hampshire in an apple orchard, and when I was a teenager, I was paying attention to what was going on in our neighborhood. Now I lived on a short street, but every single woman on our street, 30s or over, had breast cancer. every single one, including my mother. And we had a very well-known surgeon that lived probably 3/4 of a mile away. And when my mom was diagnosed, he was the one who did her mastectomy, he did her surgery. And I said to him, I said, "Do you drink your water?" And he said, "No." And he said, "I don't let my family cook with it. I don't drink it. They don't drink it." And I said, "Why? What is your reasoning?" Because I was putting this together in the back of my mind. And he said, "We live in this apple orchard where they've been spraying for years and years and years and years and years." And he said, "Where do all those pesticides go? They go down into the water table." And we all had wells. And he said, "There's no way that those pesticides aren't getting into the water." And so he said, "My family cooks with bottled water." And so I started doing my own research, and I started learning about water. I started learning about the hormones in the meat that we eat, the bovine growth hormones. Like, I just started doing a lot of research myself and learning about when I was talking to my mom's oncologist, and he said, "You're now in the highest risk group for breast cancer." And so he said, because my mom got it before she went through menopause, so he said, "You're going to have to be very proactive about your health." And he said, "Don't eat meat with hormones in it, don't smoke." Like, he started, and he said, "I do think these things have an impact."
If you have an autoimmune disease, you might know that cutting red meat from the diet is often one of the first pieces of advice out there. Do a Google search on red meat and autoimmunity and you'll find this notion is almost at every click. But how often do you think about other toxins? As an attempt to combat autoimmune disease, many patients are resorting to medications that mask symptoms triggered by toxins and introduce more pharmaceutical toxins. Hiding symptoms rather than trying to get to the root cause of the disease only prolongs suffering in the long run. What do you think is causing autoimmunity today?
Okay. In my understanding, there's a lot of different risk factors. It could start anywhere from birth, our genetics, our childhood, immunization that we take, diet, the environmental toxins, our sleeping habits. There's a lot of different risk factors today in today's society around us that is actually causing all of these organisms, toxins, everything to be formed into our body, which is not part of the way it's supposed to be functioning normally. So when there is an imbalance in any of these, then we don't know how to react to it. And so this reactivity can become a negative reactivity. And that's why we experience all of these problems. Now, whatever we take, we have a great self-defense mechanism that can actually fight off things. But as they keep increasing, our immune cells are not able to replicate as fast as the amount of toxins that are ingested. And that's why the toxins are able to fight against the immunity, and that's why they win. It's like the enemy comes in, there's more of the enemy, less of the soldiers in the body, and the enemy is able to overpower the soldiers, and that's when we have all of these symptoms. So autoimmune disease is not really when a disease has already manifested itself. It's something that can occur when symptoms start occurring. They could be a different kinds of symptoms. It could be something like a common cold. It could be an itch here, a rash there. It could be hair loss. It could be a lot of different things that occur. But it's the way we're so used to just ignoring it or applying something like a Band-Aid immediately and say, okay, I've taken care of it. But it's still fighting and fighting and fighting and trying to push things out. So that's what happens.
What do you see as being some of the biggest triggers that people are exposing themselves to today?
Okay. It depends. It depends on where we're situated. For example, here in America, my biggest concern is diet and all the drugs that we're exposed to. I was with a patient the other day who was only 6 years old and had 45 antibiotics by that time in his life, only 6 years of age. So one, you're just giving all of these different medications externally to a a child where immune system is not fully developed yet. And we're just suppressing and suppressing and suppressing the mechanisms that are able to fight off infections, then it can cause the body to be like, okay, I'm suppressed. There's nothing else I can do. So something small triggers it, and then it becomes a big thing. So that's one thing. It could be all the different drugs that we're exposed to. Second thing is diet. Look at the diet of a child nowadays. It's McDonald's and Burger King, or I'm not saying anything against fast food, but it's the same diet that we're eating that's fully processed. So one, we're not eating something straight from the tree or straight from the environment. We're like taking it out and processing it through 10 different machines and then ingesting in our body. And how are we supposed to be able to break it down in the right way that we are created to do it? And so when things like this happen, it's just a lot of triggers that just happen. The environment, the perfumes we use, the lotions we use, the beds we sleep in that are full of all of this plastic, all of these different toxins. So it's just not like one thing, it's like one thing after another thing that just builds up and piles onto this mountain of things that we're not able to resist. So those are some triggers that I think are causing it.
Stephanie, I know that you're really interested when it comes to toxicity and finding out what are some of the, being somebody that had toxic issues yourself that caused some of these great challenges. I know you're really interested in finding out what some of these sources are for people.
Yeah.
What are they, and how can people get rid of these things?
Right. Well, I think, there's across the board so many types of exposures over the course of our lifetime, every single day. Every time we eat food that's been grown conventionally, it's been sprayed with pesticides. Every time we drink out of a plastic bottle or a plastic cup, there's chemicals that are leaching from plastic. Every time we put something on our skin, whether it's a lotion or certain sunscreens, they all contain ingredients that disrupt the endocrine system, add chemicals that seep into our system, the water we drink, the exhaust fumes from cars, the exposure to certain metals. A lot of people talk about heavy metals, and comes both from mercury filled fillings, from certain ingredients from vaccines, from fish that we eat, larger fish that eat smaller fish and accumulate mercury in there. One of the kind of more recent understandings are biological toxins that come from organisms that we are exposed to or acquire, whether it's certain bacteria that our immune systems kill off, and those produce endotoxins that our immune systems can or can't clear. Mold is another one, so being exposed to mold, and not the spores themselves, but again the toxins that are released that some people's immune systems aren't able to get rid of on their own. So the list is endless. It's like, where do you want to start?
Wow, and so then how do we get rid of them?
So in conventional medicine, they always say, oh, we have a liver for that. What are you talking about? Toxic buildup. And that might have been true maybe 100 plus years ago, when the amount of toxic exposure was met by the ability for the liver to keep up with clearing it. And nowadays, though, the impact is so much higher and accumulates so much faster by just the way that we live, and in addition to that, we have these defense mechanisms that are part of the detoxification process, our microbiome, for example, that have been compromised. So our livers might be fine, but our microbiome, which is part of the biotransformative process to allow toxins to escape the system, escape the body, have been impacted by actually oftentimes those same toxins that we get exposed to.
Each and every day we're subjected to toxic heavy metals, some which we can avoid and some which we simply can't. Those with Lyme disease, parasites and other co-infections have a more difficult time clearing heavy metals from the body. These toxic metals fuel inflammation, suppress the immune system and hinder the body's detoxification systems. This sets the perfect stage for Lyme and other chronic infections to take hold in a body that becomes very toxic and without defense.
Heavy metal poisoning. Heavy metal poisoning is a huge, huge factor in autoimmune disorders, okay? When heavy metals bond to proteins in the body and get deposited throughout the body, okay, sometimes the immune system will try to go after those heavy metals and pull them out of the tissues. Because those heavy metals are causing such damage in the tissues. When that happens, the immune system's going, digging into the tissue, okay, to pull this heavy metal out, but it damages the tissue in the process. Okay, and that actually goes back and is tied into leaky gut and also faulty liver metabolism. Okay, as we age, and we have in our environment, we have all these different toxins in our environment. If you look up my book, Detox for Life, I have multiple chapters in that book talking about how there are, we just are being bombarded by toxins in our environment. And if we don't do something to eliminate or cleanse our liver of toxins on a regular basis, our liver goes from being a filter to a garbage can. Okay? How that happens is as toxins accumulate in the liver and the liver hasn't been enabled to eliminate these toxins, we haven't done things to flush the liver out, to cleanse the liver itself, or provided the liver with the nutrients it needs in order to eliminate toxins, we end up with fat deposits in our liver. Okay, so the filtration cells in our liver get converted to fat deposits, and those fat deposits become storage bins. All right, so instead of the liver filtering toxins out of the body, those fat cells become storage bins, and the liver becomes a garbage can instead of a filter. And we call that fatty liver disease. Okay, and you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, you have alcoholic fatty liver disease, and then you have it's drug-induced fatty liver disease also. We also find, I've worked with a lot of miners and people that are also working in manufacturing where they're exposed to lots of heavy metals that have fatty liver disease because of heavy metal poisoning.
One area that not a lot of people look at to find sources is parts of your environment you've been exposed to that may have been incorporated into your body or that may be coming into your body as we speak. That's environmental toxins. And when I say environmental toxins, I mean chemicals and toxic metals like lead and mercury and cadmium. And most of us think we live a healthy lifestyle, but believe it or not, every moment of every day, we're being inundated by chemicals that our liver and kidney have to process, just like the medicines we take, just like the food we eat. They have to be filtered through and gotten rid of. Well, if too much is coming in, you can't actually get rid of them, and your body tries to find places to stick those chemicals and those metals so they won't do too much damage. Why is your immune system not working so well? Toxins are a piece of the puzzle. You know, nutritional fortification is another piece of the puzzle. So if you're not having the right nutrients to help you fight the battle, that's a piece of the puzzle. But I love toxins. They're reversible. You can learn to avoid them. In your current environment, you can learn to get them out of your body once they've gotten trapped inside in your fat cells and in your other vital organs.
Okay, so certain things that you can use to actually heal the body from within is to clean up or stimulate or modulate our immune system in a way that it doesn't react instantly to something. It's just like anger management. When you're treating somebody with anger management, you don't tell them to not get angry, you'll ask them to control it. You'll teach them ways on how to control it. You will give them ideas, tips on how to take care of it in the same way. You don't just tell the body to stop talking. You know, if you just ask somebody to stop talking, this will just build and build and build, and it will burst. In the same way, you're just modulating it. And when you modulate something, it will take its time, it will heal slowly, and it will manifest itself slowly as well. Our body is one thing, right? Let's look at it as a whole. Rheumatoid arthritis is something about the joints. Crohn's or ulcerative colitis is something about the gut. Alzheimer's dementia, which is now also being thought about as it's a hypothesis that it is an autoimmune disease. It's brain related. But everything is part of one human body. And to treat the human body, you can't just treat one part of the body. You'll have to treat the whole body. But to treat the whole body, you'll have to start treating somewhere. What is the most common route of exposing the body to an external trigger? What is the most common route? Diet. I think it's diet. It's where we're directly ingesting something. Yes, we're inhaling something. Can we stop ourselves from breathing? That's not something that we could do easily, but we could actually not stop, but at least control what we put in our mouth so it's digested and absorbed differently. Just like different organs are in the body, all work together, each organ has different layers around itself, and each one, like whatever we eat, has to be absorbed through this layer and go to different parts of the organs to function properly. So if you can first change somebody's diet or control somebody's diet, and in any term, like we say, appetite, when we can control somebody's appetite, we can control somebody's hunger, change it slowly. You don't have to do a drastic change. Okay, here is this food. This is all you're able to eat. And now I want you to stop eating all of that and I want to give you just this one thing. The body's scared. It doesn't know what to do. It's like, this is a foreign, it'll start fighting against it. So it's a slow tweak of putting things back into balance.
I was having itchy eyes that I thought were related to some sort of allergy or something, but I tried essential oils, I tried natural people started telling, I've always been like pretty natural minded, but people said, Emily, this might just be one of those times where you need to actually take a medication. And so I tried that, didn't work. It was just really frustrating. Itching of the eyes was gone. They were really swollen. The skin was cracked. They were always bloodshot. It looked horrible. They were always watering. That all went away within probably 3 or 4 weeks. I lost weight. I was dealing with acid reflux. That's completely gone. I was having achy joints. When we were living with some friends, they had a 2-story house, and there were some mornings where I couldn't even walk down the stairs without pain. Like I was really stiff, and I didn't understand what was going on there, but that went away, which wasn't even something that I was expecting. I just thought it was just something that, just the way my body is, that's the way it is, that I just have to live with this, and this is just my reality. But I didn't realize it was something that I could actually change. I rarely get headaches now, unless I eat something that I wasn't supposed to. Then I get a headache and I'm like, well, I know where that came from. I was having some really bad ankle pain, and I went to see a specialist about it. This is before I went to the holistic doctor, and they told me I had to wear special shoes. So I got rid of all my other shoes, and I could only afford to buy 2 pairs of these expensive shoes for my feet. And now I don't have to wear special shoes anymore. Like, that pain is gone, and I can wear whatever kinds of shoes. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird to be able to affect my health myself than just deal with it. Like, to be able to change something in my life within my habits and then live a different life.
The symptoms of an autoimmune disease can often mimic the symptoms of adrenal fatigue. The two conditions are related, and it's important to note that the differences between the two, the similarities, and how both can exist in a susceptible body.
What really helped me with Dr. Ub is I just started reading a bunch of books that he recommended, and literally I cut out caffeine overnight. Because caffeine, even though, and that's what everybody, like, we live off that, like, oh, that 3 o'clock kick, right, to get me through the day. The problem with that is when you have adrenal fatigue, if you know what that's what you have, you'll have this, oh, there it went, and then boy, you crash, and then you feel terrible. And if you don't know that, then you're just getting worse and worse and worse. And so I'm not saying everybody that's tired has adrenal fatigue, but there's a way to measure that. And so I'm so grateful. I knew that that's what it was, and I knew that caffeine was one of the worst things for adrenal fatigue. So I cut out coffee immediately. I also, here's the perfect storm. Get up in the morning, cup of coffee. At 11 o'clock, another cup of coffee. 3 o'clock, another cup of coffee. Come home, don't exercise, and pour yourself a glass of wine. Perfect storm. I mean, how many people do you know that do that? I know a whole lot. I could count, thousands of them. That was what I was doing. So there were a lot of, when you look at what's wrong with this picture, there were a lot of things. And living in Europe, I love coffee. I'm addicted to coffee. That smell, it's for me even more of the process of drinking coffee than what it would do to me. But I didn't realize how much coffee I was putting in my body and how much caffeine I was just going. And now I realize why is because my body was craving, it was depleted. And so when I cut that out and I cut wine out, I started drinking water, I started doing my exercises again. I was borderline high blood pressure, and I still watch that today because I said, I don't want to take another pill, right? I want to get there healthy wise. So I noticed that switching to chicken and fish primarily and red meat now and then was good for me. Things like that, but everybody's body is different. More vegetables is good for me. Organic is good for me. Every morning I would be like, what am I going to eat? And sometimes I wouldn't even eat and I'd run out the door. Worst thing you can do, right? Mom was right when she said your most important breakfast or meal of the day is breakfast. So what do I do every morning now? Power smoothie, right? You got your Vega proteins, you throw in some spinach and some frozen organic blueberries, scoop of almond butter to fill you up a little more. Game changer, right? You're out the door and you already are like giving your body the nutrients it needs to. When you give energy all day to people, you have to make sure you're giving it back to yourself. So again, I come back to if you don't, take care of your body, where are you going to live? And that's what I would always hear at these when Gary Keller would speak, and I never understood it until I crashed. And now I get it. I get it big time. Because without this energy inside in this body, it changes everything. Life isn't the beautiful life that it should be, right?
All of these things affected me mentally and physically. And I'm a person who does not really show the world what I'm going through. I've always had this persona of being somebody who has this strong mind, charming personality, or things of that sort where I won't show my weakness. Let me put it that way. So this was something I was doing in hiding. This was something I was experiencing alone. Autoimmune disease has a lot of shame and guilt and pain associated with it, and people are not willing to share it with anybody. I hid it from my own family, and I told them I've been having abdominal pain, but I did not use the word blood because my mother's also a healthcare provider, and she would know immediately what I was experiencing. Along with this, I had depression. I was stressed that I didn't get into residency, and things just got worse and worse. And during this period of time, I was interviewing in different parts of the country for residency. And so I was flying from New York to Chicago to Florida to California, I live in Texas. And so it was no rest, it was stress and all of that. And eventually, a year and a half later, I went in and decided to get a colonoscopy when I knew I was fatigued and my hemoglobin went down to 7. And I'm an individual who cannot function when hemoglobin goes down to 11. And the normal for a female is about 13. And so I was also getting depressed. I was just sitting in my room, didn't know what to do. I was fatigued. I couldn't do anything that I was used to doing. I couldn't go hang out with my friends as much. I couldn't just eat. As soon as I ate, I had to rush to the restroom. It was debilitating. It was really, really hard. And it got worse. It got worse in 2014 when I applied for residency in March of 2014. You have to apply in September the previous year, so I applied in 2013 and I got the results in March of 2014 that I did not get residency. And so that in itself just dampened my spirits. It dampened the person I am, because I was always a person that achieved everything that I've worked at. I was always a gold medalist in school, in college. I was called the geek. I hung out with friends, and all of us were the toppers in our college, in our university. I was the teacher's pet. That way, and in relationship-wise, I was glad with my family. So this just literally killed me. So there was a month of period where I was just sprawled on the floor, crying, because I was sick. I didn't get into residency. I know I'm gonna cry. I sprawled on my floor and cried because there was nothing I could do about it. And I was like, Lord, why me? Like, you've given me so much in life. You've given me wonderful parents, a great family, a smart mind, somebody who can work hard. And I was able to do all of this and achieve all of this in life. And here I am without a career, without good health, and just sitting at home at this age, after achieving so much in my life, but not able to accomplish anything. And it was very, very hard. It was very, very hard. And there were a lot of friends of mine and physicians that were able to help me. My church pastor, my close friends. There was like only a handful of people I shared this with, and they were like, take strength in the Lord, and that's what I was doing. But I needed medical help. And I had a very good friend who was a gastroenterologist who went to my church, and I do Sabbath school with him, I preach, I do all kinds of things with him, but I was not able to share and open up and tell him, I need help. My gastrointestinal system is dying. And I couldn't tell it to my parents too, because I was ashamed. And I think by May of that year, I finally confessed to my parents that that I had something that I had to share, and I needed treatment, and I'm willing to go for treatment. I will say that in this last 6 months, with all the knowledge I had, I tried everything that I have studied and researched and learned. I've helped change my diet. I called my uncles and aunts in India, tried natural remedies, did a lot of different things, but nothing seemed to help. And so I finally told my dad, and we went to my friend. And I told him I need to get a colonoscopy. These are my symptoms. And he was like, Shruti, why didn't you share this earlier? And I'm like, I thought it was IBS and I could heal it. And I just thought it was just constipation that was causing this blood. And I said, I know what it was, but I just did not want to have the name autoimmune disease attached to my life. Because it's a hard disease to shake off. And I went and got a colonoscopy, and we found 20 ulcers in my rectum. And he's like, I have to put you on a steroid or something. And I'm like, could we start with the least harsh medication? And I will try other ways to help and change myself.
And then the fourth trigger, infection. And I've mentioned infection with other patients, parasites, bacterial infections, yeast overgrowths or yeast infections, prion infections, mycoplasma infections. There's all different kinds or types of infections. But infections, when I say infection, I'm not talking about, some people are saying, well, I don't have an infection, I don't feel bad, I don't have a cold or a flu. It's not what I'm talking about. Think of Lyme. It's a chronic infection. Think of, if you ever heard of, there's a bacteria called Helicobacter pylori. It won a Nobel Prize for its discovery. It was discovered that this type of chronic infection causes acid
reflux, heartburn, and gastric erosions. So, you know, one of my favorite longtime stories is a young woman named Jessica. Jessica came to see me, and she was really struggling. She was actually accused of being an anorexic. Her doctors were accusing her of, you know, forcing vomiting and because she couldn't put weight on. And she was wasting away. And so when they brought her in, like, I was the first doctor that even believed that she wasn't anorexic. I loved her story because that was the backdrop to it, is that she had gone to several experts, several specialists. You know, God led her to me. You know, I believed her, and you know what was interesting about her, she had some parasites. You know, parasites steal from you. They rob your nutrition. Like, that was one of the main things we found. And we found several things with her. She had a lot of different food allergies. But she was manifesting all kinds of symptoms. Weight loss, she couldn't put weight on. She was having joint pains, her hair was falling out. I mean, there were a lot of things going on. I don't think anybody could have really said, hey, let's pinpoint it to this one condition. But she had multiple autoimmune processes going on in her body. So, I mean, if you're struggling with kind of a chronic autoimmune, you know, array, if you will, pay attention, because in this case, she had parasites. That was one of the big factors. She was gluten sensitive, she had parasites, she was malnourished, and the parasites were eating her food. Now, in her case, what's interesting is, you know, we used some natural botanicals to try to knock them out. Didn't work, right? It just didn't work. And this is one of those areas where melding of medicine and natural medicine can work. Like, we ended up sending her to a doctor in New York, and he, you know, his history is very interesting. He actually worked in third world countries for years studying parasites. So he actually, we sent her up to New York to visit with him, and it actually ended up taking a pharmaceutical agent in this case to actually eradicate the parasite. Once we got the parasite under control, and we got the diet under control, and we got her well nourished, look, she's acting, she's singing, she's capable of doing, you know, great things in the world, all because I believed that she wasn't anorexic, all because I didn't accuse her, right, of being a liar when she was in my office asking for my help, right? And that to me is a travesty. Like, we can joke about it today, but like, she visited how many doctors and was called a liar by how many doctors when it was her intent to go to them to get help? What kind of world are we living in where somebody comes and asks for your help and you say, you're a liar and I don't believe that you really need my help, you know, when you're a doctor?
She had a parasite at one time that was contributing to her arthritis, and we had to do like a parasite regimen to get rid of that, so some extra pills. So, but right now.
And you were able to confirm that you removed the parasite, or?
Dr. Osborne, his tests, yeah, we did like a stool test to check, and it was definitely there, and he said that one was kind of notorious for joint inflammation and arthritis, and so we did I think it was 6 or 8 week regimen to get rid of that, and then retested, and it was gone, and that's when her arthritis started getting better, was when we were doing that. We already saw results just after a few weeks of being on that, but then we confirmed that was all gone.
If you think parasites only lead to gut disturbances, such as an upset stomach and diarrhea, then think again. Problems that happen in your stomach don't stay in your stomach. Parasites may cause autoimmune disease in 2 ways. First, the inflammation caused by intestinal infection can cause an increase in the permeability of the small intestine, known in colloquial terms as leaky gut. Second, over 2/3 of your body's immune system is located in the wall of the small intestine. The immune cells, called lymphocytes, leave the intestine and travel all over your body. When activated by a parasitic infection, they can carry the inflammatory message to your joints, your skin, your eyes, and your lungs.
Parasite cleanse, I always like the herbal route. There are anti-parasitic drugs and things like that, but I feel like there's just so many natural tools that are available. And I had done parasite cleanses before, and I'm like, I've never seen anything, I must not have parasites. And a couple years ago, when I actually took some mimosa pudica seed, organic mimosa pudica seed, just literally a few days later, I had a couple 20-inch worms. Like, I went to wipe and they were hanging out of me. They were dead, but I took some toilet paper and pulled them out. And then for the next month and a half, I just had piles come out, and my brain just started, I'm like, what? I have worms? If I have them, relatively healthy guy, who else does? Immediately, and this is maybe a benefit of my personality, but immediately started implementing it with clients, and I'm like, we have to parasite cleanse, you know, I think this is a big missing link, and sure enough, piles just started coming out. So I think as long as we can do something that's effective, you'll see what comes out. And take this with a grain of salt that only about 30% of parasites you can actually see with the naked eye, but and there's about 134 different species of parasites, so the list is quite big and you won't see them all. But when you see stuff come out, it's like, who needs a lab test? Who needs any other confirmation than you see the stuff come out of you? So I recommend everybody doing parasite cleansing. I love Mimosa pudica seed. I love that. That works really well. I also love ingredients like neem, N-E-E-M, clove. There's an Ayurvedic herb, very well used antiparasitic called Vedanga that works really well as well. So I like using antiparasitics like that, taking that, and the rule of thumb with parasite cleansing or parasite killing, if you will, is be persistent and be consistent. So when I first did that, I was like, oh my gosh, I got a slew out, like I'm not seeing any more worms, and I just stopped. And then some symptoms came back, and I'm like, maybe it's some more parasites. A month and a half later, I started taking the stuff again, and piles came out, and I'm like, oh, I got them all, good, done. And then all of a sudden symptoms came back. A month and a half later, I did it again, and I got more out, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm missing something here. And what I realized is that parasites generally have a life cycle where they'll reproduce every 2 weeks. So when you're taking stuff, and whether you see stuff or not, I like to recommend to be persistent and be consistent, because you just don't know when they're going to hatch. Now, potentially full moons and new moons are more active times, especially full moons, but it's not a guarantee. So I like being persistent and consistent with those ingredients. Now, there are ingredients like black walnut or the tansy, wormwood, maybe where you don't want to take those for super long periods, so you can cycle on and off those, but like clove, neem, vedanga, mimosa pudica seed, like be consistent and persistent with that. But here's the key. So anytime that you start killing parasites or you start attempting to, you're gonna have two things that happen. Parasites give off byproducts when you start killing them, or when they start getting stressed, because they want you to stop. So they're gonna produce ammonia, they're gonna produce aldehyde, they're gonna stir up, they're gonna change your thought process, they're gonna stir your gut up, and they want you to stop. And this is again where the persistent and consistent comes in. And then the other thing is, once parasites actually die, if there's heavy metals inside of them, if there's viruses, bacteria inside of them, if there's mold spores, those things can potentially release. Now, mimosa pudica seed's really good because it really suffocates and helps to pull out, but there's some parasite killers, that kind of, like kill and it explodes the parasite and these things come off. So regardless of which it is, if you're just making them mad and they're releasing chemicals, or you kill them and they're basically debris or chemicals released, this is where we need something to help bind on and grab onto it. And ammonia is a really big issue if people have muscle soreness, brain foggy, if you drink alkaline water and you're like, I just don't do well with it. Ammonia, big parasite issue. If you've had a moldy house or a moldy building before, you definitely want to be taking something to bind onto it. And science has really come along in the natural world so far that there's things like bioactive carbons that not only bind onto these toxins in the gut, but now they've been able to be modified where they actually go systemic throughout the body, and you can take them with or without food. So it's really exciting where we're at right now, functional medicine wise. But parasite cleanse, and then take some binders with it to help mop that up, and it should be really a good, successful protocol for you.
I like to use the term eat whole foods, mostly plants. That's where I would go. So we are created again to eat something straight off the trees or straight off the ground, or when those are not available, to kill animals and eat them. When we do that, we're eating something that is easily digestible, easily available, clean, without any preservatives used, without anything else from the environment that is actually ingested in it. Talk about plucking an apple from a tree. You pluck it, you eat it, that's good for your body. Now, when you cut the apple and then you add caramel on it, you add a bunch of sugar on it, and then you bake it in the oven and kill everything else that's in the apple. What you're really eating is just straight up sugar or straight up preservative that you'll be doing. So my thought is, eat something that is whole plant-based. Eat a grain that is straight growing. eat grains from the fields. So the way I would treat something is to go back to eating whole foods and to decrease eating processed foods. That's where I'll go.
I see, disease labels across the board, but the causative issue is very similar across the board. So with fertility cases, what I see in the unexplained is a lack of the right kind of nutrient density, a lack of immune resiliency, like too much burden on the system, where the major message to their biological ecosystem is this isn't an opportune time to make a baby. That requires a whole lot of excess resources that we at this day and age have less and less of, because we're navigating and negotiating so much more impact over the course of our early lifetime. And we actually see it even more pronounced in kids these days, right? Like there's illnesses and behavioral issues and all sorts of labels of of what children deal with these days that were never present when we were young. And I think it's because they come into a world where the impact is so much more immediate and accumulates faster. And so I'll see, in my patient population, a lot of them are actually quite young, even late teens, 20s, 30s, and they're pretty sick already, as opposed to, the older generation that I'll see, 60s, 70s, where they may start manifesting stuff, but they manifested it much later. And my hypothesis is that, their exposure rate was slower for a lot longer period of time as they were getting older, as this younger generation is getting the accumulation exposure that much faster, like so much more impact right away.
How would he tell you about it?
My head just hurts so bad. He would say that mostly at night before going to bed. It's hurt all day, and I couldn't tell if it was like a cry for attention because he didn't want to go to bed, or if it was something serious. And, of course, what pops into your head, oh, does he have a tumor or something scary like that? And I thought, oh, we need to get to the bottom of this. And well, then when we started changing things, he started taking the supplements that he needed, and we changed a few things in our diet even more. Then he stopped doing that. So I knew it wasn't like a ploy to get out of bedtime or something like that. He really was not feeling well.
Seeing your son sick, so like headaches, that's like unusual for a child to have headaches, right?
Well, after we moved out of the mold infested apartment, the headaches basically went away. The belly aches took a little bit longer, and we had to tweak a few things after he got tested, but the belly aches are virtually non-existent. But I mean, he's only 5, so who knows if this had gone on however much longer, who knows what his life would be like the deficiencies that he had. And
what does that mean to you to know that your son doesn't have to walk that path anymore?
It's priceless. Like, just thinking about some adults that I know who have Crohn's, who are just in and out of the hospital and dealing with tons of medications and doctor's appointments, and still eating whatever they want, whenever they want, but not really realizing how it's affecting their health, and spending hours upon hours in the bathroom. And I just knowing that he's learning at this age that his body's a temple and that he can treat it, the way God intended, is like priceless to learn that. He tells me, I just want there to be a grocery store where every single thing on the shelves is something that I can eat, or that anyone else in the world can eat, and it won't make them sick.
Do you say that?
Yeah.
That's really cool, man. That's a great idea.
When we come to a specific disease like colitis, what happens in colitis is now you have infected the body so much that now it is totally inflamed. When it is totally inflamed, whatever we're eating is not, one, being absorbed properly, or two, being digested properly. Because our skin barrier now has been broken, and that's where the term leaky gut syndrome comes in. Two, we don't have the regular or the commensal bacteria that helps break down the food particles in our body. Now we have pathogenic bacteria entering our body, because once you have all of this inflammation, once you have all of this break of the barrier, then you have different bacteria in your body. So the term dysbiosis comes from it. So here now you have to think about the word dysbiosis, different kind of bacteria mixed in the same thing. Two, you're talking about breakage of barriers. So leaky gut syndrome, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, all of these things happen. And third, you have inflammation. So because something is inflamed, it's not working the right way. Now you cannot just be like, okay, eat this the way it is, because your body's not able to break it. So now you'll have to help the individual eat food that's already broken down for them, at the same time help repair everything that is broken down. So you'll be treating inflammation, you'll be treating the dysbiosis, and giving them a diet that is easily broken down. So it's not straight up, you're like breaking a head of lettuce and here you're eating. No, they're not able to digest it, and then it will also be eroding the intestinal walls. So you're going to break it down for them in a way that is either cooked or juiced or any form that will be easily absorbed, and the body's not working extra hard to break it down into the body. So that's the time you don't just do straight up whole food. It's still a whole food, but it's just broken down. It's like baby food. You can't give a baby an apple. You have to like mush it down, break it into smaller substances that they can just swallow without chewing. It's the same way. It helps them to digest it and absorb it easily. And then you're also giving little quantity, so your body's not really overworking.
And that's why a lot of people that have chronic inflammation in their gut manifested in some of these autoimmune conditions, why they experience chronic pain after eating, correct?
Right. Because when something that's already inflamed, red, it's like adding oil to the fire. It's like it's not able to digest it, it's not able to absorb it. And now you're giving something new and it's trying to fight it and fight it. So it's trying to digest it, it's trying to fight it, and then it just gets exhausted and fatigued, and that's when pain happens. Autoimmunity happens over time. It's a chronic disease. It doesn't happen overnight. In the same way, the pain and the symptoms take time to heal. So you cannot expect it to heal overnight again. So say it's taken 10 years to get to this point of having Crohn's disease, then it might not take 10 years, but it will still take a long time to kind of reverse everything. So yes, we can eventually heal that person, but we have to start slow and start healing the barrier slowly, because cells don't form overnight. Like our RBCs take 120 days to recreate or to replenish. So that's why when we give something, or we give a different diet, or we give a different supplement, or we give a different medication to help heal, it will take time to heal and come back. But eventually, yes, once we heal the inflammation, once we heal the dysbiosis, then we're able to bring the person back to normal and able to eat whatever he was able to eat before. But now we're going to give him a cleaner diet to work on.
For you to look forward to, for you to look into the future and see a future where your family are suffering, seeing your son go through all these different things, because obviously a lot of families are experiencing that today.
Mm-hmm.
And people go through decades of suffering, premature death, and not to say that is something that we as mortals can know for sure won't happen to us, but at the same time, you know your son as well, you know that he's on the right program. But what is it like for you to think of your family or your son, particularly, or he's here right now, to see a future where he's sick all the time? What does that look like for you as a mother?
Oh, it's sad. It breaks your heart. Nobody wants that for their kid. No one wants their child to go through like physical challenges. No one wishes. You ask people when they're pregnant, what do you want, a boy or a girl? And they say, I just want a healthy baby. Like that's what we want for our lives. We want to be healthy. And when you're healthy, then you can focus on other things. When you're sick, you're focused on being sick and how you feel, and you're grumpy, or you're in bed and you're miserable. And it's really hard to focus on the things that are good, or it's really hard to think outside of yourself because you're focused so much on the pain that you're in. But when you're healthy, you've got the whole world in front of you. You're not having to focus on yourself and taking care of yourself. You've got that. You've got that, and you can reach out and be there for others. And so, I don't know, nobody wants, just like I don't want Will to be sick.
3 years ago, when you have ulcerative colitis, the diet that we put patients on was called a low residue diet. That's the name of the diet. A low residue diet essentially is eliminating all kinds of vegetables, all kinds of roughage, and you eat only meat that your body is able to digest easily. And when you eat, say you eat lettuce and you break it down, the pieces of the vegetable get stuck in your intestines, and that will create more inflammation, and that will create more pain. And I'm like, I can't. I'm primarily a vegetarian. I rarely eat all of this. And then he's like, no beans. And I'm like, I live off of lentils. Like, that's my staple diet. And so it was very, very hard to even imagine myself doing a low residue diet. But so he gave me an immunosuppressant, and this was not even something I purchased. He had samples of it. So he gave me the sample medication. And I started taking a high dose of 1,600 milligrams of that immunosuppressant. And I went home, and obviously my parents are shocked, and they don't know how to take care of me right now. And I am not letting them come close to me because I'm like, I can take it, I'm fine, I can take care of myself. And I struggled. And I called my uncle in India who does homeopathy. And previously, when I thought it was IBS, I told him I have IBS, and he sent me all the medications for IBS, homeopathy treatment for it. And then I called and confessed, and I said, no, I don't have IBS anymore. I have IBD, and it's ulcerative colitis. My colon is inflamed, and I have plenty of ulcers, and I need to heal it. And he sent me a whole set. And you cannot send medication from a different country because customs doesn't allow it. So it was sent with a friend of mine, and here I'm totally defaming a friend of mine, but sent it through family members and friends. And I had to take a regimen of homeopathy morning, noon, and night. And whenever I had symptoms of pain, I had to take a tincture, which was a very high dose of homeopathy medication. So I did that. I did the immunosuppressant, and I ate meat, and I did not feel good on meat. I didn't like it. And so after a week or two, I decided to slowly introduce vegetables again by myself. And so I made lentils, and I made beans, and I mashed it up. I cooked all kinds of greens, spinach, and different kinds of spinach that me Indians eat, because I'm like, I am anemic and I need dark green leafy vegetables. I love pomegranate. I'm not allowed to eat pomegranate. So again, I juiced all of this. I cooked all my vegetables, and I fed myself bland, cooked food to help myself and heal myself. And so slowly I introduced one vegetable after another, one bean after another, one fruit after another in a cooked form that would be easily absorbed. And I slowly started reducing my meat intake because I wasn't feeling good on pure meat. And I do not eat red meat. The only meat I eat is chicken and fish. So it was just a very hard balance. And I'm like, I'm not even getting any food. This was a time when I knew nothing about supplements other than iron. That was the only supplement I was put on, and a multivitamin. And so those were the only two things that I took. And while I was doing this, after using homeopathy. I used homeopathy for 3 weeks, and then I stopped using it. I said, okay, that was what my uncle told me. It's called the Banerjee protocol, and it's now becoming more and more prevalent, and they're using it in the Cancer Institute, the MD Anderson Cancer Institute in Texas. So I started using the Banerjee protocol, did 3 weeks of it, put it aside. I started alternating my I first decreased the medication from 1600 to 800. Then I started taking it alternate days. Then I started taking it every 3 days. And in less than 4 months, I stopped using it. I stopped using any medication. I just ate right. I started exercising. While all of this was happening, I was still looking for what to do because my education was at a standstill. I worked part-time at a doctor, and one of my friends, who's a pediatric endocrinologist in Florida, actually mentioned naturopathic medicine to me. And I'm like, what is naturopathic medicine? I've never heard about it. I looked it up, and naturopathic medicine basically consists of 6 different modalities. And those included hydrotherapy, homeopathy, counseling, nutrition, herbal medicine, and I'm like, this is something, and physical medicine. I'm like, this is something I would love to do, because I was trained and raised in a Christian family that believed in treating our body naturally first and then doing drugs later. And so I said, this is some, I'm sorry?
And then doing drugs later if necessary.
If necessary. So if it was an acute thing, then. I have, going back to my past, I was raised, I'm Indian, but I was born in India, but I spent 15 years of my life in Kuwait. So we grew up in Kuwait, and my mom was a nurse, and I was exposed to the Gulf War. And then during the Gulf War, my family as refugees went back to India, and I spent 2 to 3 years of my life from the ages of 5 to 9 in India, growing up on a farm. So my grandmother used herbs for everything. I fall down, I get hurt, she finds an herb and then uses it. My stomach's upset, she finds a seed that she makes tea out of. My maternal grandmother was a homeopath, and so she kept giving me all of these little pills for any kind of thing. So I've never used drugs. I hardly ever got sick. So I always knew when I was in medical school that if there's anything that would bring me down, it would be an autoimmune disease. So when I got ulcerative colitis, it was like my worst fear coming true. And so I've always used herbs, I've always used diet, I've always used exercise, hydrotherapy, like all of these things to help myself or heal myself from anything. I had acne when I was a teenager, and the only way that it worked after using a myriad of antibiotics was homeopathy and changing of my diet. And so when naturopathic medicine was introduced to me, I said, this is the place that I need to go, and this is what I should be doing, because this is what I am. This is what defines the person I am.
For those suffering with Lyme, they often seem to be on a roller coaster of secondary infections. If you or somebody you know has Lyme, you know how detrimental it can be, how much it can limit somebody's ability to really enjoy life and thrive. But it doesn't have to continue this way. With the right protocol, Lyme can be overcome and effectively shut down. As we continue to learn more about the body, we can learn the tools needed to finally break free of that up and down cycle of diminishing health. And tell me how you turned around your condition.
So, I changed my diet. I stopped using processed food as much. I started baking my own bread if I needed to eat bread.
So you didn't have a problem with gluten?
No, I did not have a problem with gluten. And
have you noticed that it is a problem for many people with colitis?
It is.
More typically or less typically?
How do I put this? There are different diseases that manifest differently, and the root cause of a lot of different things is dysbiosis and also celiac disease. Now, celiac disease is where you're totally allergic to gluten. You should totally avoid gluten because your body's not able to break down the bonds and eat it. That is celiac disease. Now, research has found out that many people do not have to be totally gluten intolerant, but they can be gluten sensitive. That means their body's not able to break down gluten and absorb it into their body. And so I have tried putting myself on gluten totally, and then noticing if there's any differences, and I didn't. But I do not eat gluten as much. The only gluten I would eat is when I make myself a whole wheat chapati or roti, which is an Indian tortilla. But I stopped eating bread. But that's where gluten can come from. And it's not the gluten by itself. It's the toxins that the toxins that the chemicals in gluten that actually hold on to and break down in our body. That's what actually affects it. So those are in our intestines. There is a barrier, and when that barrier is broken down, it could be broken down by different things, and gluten is one of the things that can break it down and cause leaky gut syndrome. And when that happens, it actually prevents our food to be absorbed in the right way, because now instead of breaking down into particles that can be absorbed in our body, the huge particle is actually just going through junctions that are broken, like our skin becomes this way, and it's just flowing through different parts of our skin. So gluten has been found to be one of those causes. Another cause is dairy. So these are the two things that we have noticed that will cause worsen and inflammation in the body, or specifically in the gut. I started exercising. I started running 3 miles a day. And I set myself a time every day between 6 to 8. This is going to be my exercise routine. I started doing yoga again because I've always loved doing yoga. The stretching really helps me. So I started doing yoga, and yoga is primarily physically. That's what I've been doing.
You didn't do the spiritual component?
No, I am a Christian. And when we have to do a meditation part of it or recite a mantra, I always prayed. And yoga is something I've done since medical school. So since I was in first, second year of medical school, yoga really helped me with my focus, with my concentration, with my memory, with my, it's called the student syndrome, with back pain, with any symptoms, muscle tensions I had, yoga always helped me. So I've always done yoga physically. And the breathing exercises. It's not just a stretching exercise, it's really restoring the whole body. So I do a lot of restorative yoga and physical yoga, and not the spiritual component of it. So I did yoga again, I exercised, I changed my diet, I ate more healthier and cleaner food, so I ate more whole foods. And now slowly, from eating mashed food and cooked food and all, I was slowly able to eat all my raw food again. I started ingesting all kinds of salads and tomatoes and lettuces and kale and everything again, and I was fine. 2 years later, I went and repeated my colonoscopy, and it was clean. There was no inflammation, there was no ulcer, there was nothing. And my physician was like, "Are you sure you were diagnosed with ulcerative colitis?" And I'm like, "Yes, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis." Pull up my previous record, and you can see it's ulcers in my rectum. And he's like, "It's not Crohn's." I said, "No, it wasn't Crohn's, it was ulcerative colitis." And he's like, "How did you do this?" And I explained that. Now, in addition, in this 6 months, I joined medical school. So, naturopathic medical school. When I joined naturopathic medical school, I learned other supplements that we can use. I started using anti-inflammatory herbs. I started using curcumin. I started using boswellia, which is frankincense. I started using herbs that I know that would heal the inflammation I have in my body anywhere. I learned herbs that would restore, so adaptogens that would actually help modulate your immune system and will help with different hormone balance in your body. So I started taking those supplements. I started taking vitamin C. I started eating fruits and vegetables that had high vitamins and minerals or nutrient dense food. And slowly now, 3-4 years later, I still have had no symptoms by God's grace.
Thank you for joining us again on the Autoimmune Secret. Hope you got a ton of value from this episode. Please make sure to share this with your friends and loved ones as they are counting on you. And please support our mission as well. Purchase this and take it home to own it for your library. This can be a great tool to help others. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Have you been enjoying the series so far? Has it been a gift or a blessing in your life? Do you know somebody that you feel would need to see this information, that it would help them dramatically, that it could help to change or even save their life? There's a special opportunity right now to take a special saving on the Autoimmune Secrets package. In this package, you'll be able to get access to the full-length expert interviews. You'll also be able to see the bonus episodes. You'll get access to the question and answer videos in response to your questions, and many other things, including the ability, the opportunity to connect directly with the experts in this series on our live calls that are all a part of the package. So I just want to invite you to make the decision today to own this resource, because it will help you. It'll be a blessing in your home library. You'll be able to share it with your loved ones, and it will help to touch your life and the lives of those that you love. And it will also help to support our mission to continue spreading this message across the world, to share resources for free to help save lives, to not have to go through what I call autoimmune hell. That does not have to happen when you have access to the tools, and our mission is to share these resources. So please support us in that mission so we can continue as we continue to support amazing charities that help to touch and save lives across the world, especially in countries and in communities where they have very little and are struggling to stay alive. So that's our commitment to the world, to others, and it's our commitment to you. So go ahead and take action today to own this powerful resource that will change your life.